Thank you very much for being here. We've got an exciting webinar for you. We are going to be talking about how to go from a concept to a minimum viable product, or at least a demoable product to your stakeholders very quickly in a matter of days. And hopefully we'll be able to show you what you're going to accomplish in about 45 minutes or so when we do the demo on this webinar. So first of all, thank you very much for making it. Hopefully all of you are keeping safe with all of the novel coronavirus threat going on. Um, and I wanted to introduce a couple of my panelists, co-panelists. One is Eric Sariniaki. He's the co-founder of Digital Asset. So he's going to be talking about the problem that startup owners, aspiring entrepreneurs, people who have an idea, running from pillar to post, trying to get the MVP running, looking for a technical co-founder, trying to get funding, get stakeholder buy-in, validate their idea, all of those kind of common challenges that any entrepreneur and any startup owner has, any founder has. So he's going to be talking about that particular challenge and what could be a potential solution. And then, what we're going to do is introduce a real life concept, a concept that, we've been thinking about for the past couple of years, actually. So we'll lay out that business idea, and then we'll let Levante Barzi, who's on the call with us. He's the client engineer here at Digital Asset. He's going to obviously a little bit of pre-work has gone into it, but he's going to show you how to take that concept and bring it live using the stack that we're going to talk to you about. Just a couple of logistical items. If you've got any questions, feel free to post them in the either the Q&A or the chat panel. I'll keep monitoring it and post the questions to Eric and Levi as required, or even answer them myself if I can. And then, of course, a copy of the recording will be sent after the webinar. So if you need to leave early for some reason, don't worry, you'll get the recording in your inbox. And of course, feel free to get in touch with us anytime later. So with that, I'll quickly hand it over to Eric, who can take us through the concept in a few minutes.
Thanks, Manish. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for attending. Hopefully this is a little bit of an alternative from your normal Netflix evening. So this should be nowhere near as riveting, but at least keep you from going all the way through your playlist in one night. So as Manish mentioned, we are focused heavily on making sure that people are significantly more productive and get to an outcome for themselves and their stakeholders as soon as possible. A little bit about Digital Asset and why that's what we're doing. We started about 6 years ago, and we've spent the majority of that time focused on how to build applications for very modern technologies. And what we've built is something that we call Daml, D-A-M-L, which is a new programming language and application framework that allows a developer to build very complex multi-party applications extremely quickly. Now, those are a lot of terms that maybe don't mean something to everybody, but the idea is that any application where a few different users or legal entities or businesses would be interacting with each other in some shared common workflow, that type of application describes, something like a bank risk system, but it also describes things like eBay or Airbnb. So you're generally in that category of type of application, where Daml gives you language and a whole set of tools that just makes it significantly easier for you to build that application and maintain it over time. One of the really key properties of the framework that we've built is we are trying to make it possible for you to run your application on a variety of different types of infrastructures. For every given application, not only does a different infrastructure make sense than another, but that can change over time. So for example, on the very first day, you might choose to pick a very traditional standard database style infrastructure because you're just trying to figure out, does my application have meaning? Do people care about it? Can I get some users? And then later you might do something like put it on a distributed ledger because you're looking for new types of network effects and developer opportunities. And in the future, you might even run that application against something like a secure enclave or a very specialized type of infrastructure that is starting to become popular across the cloud environments. So the idea is that if you build your application in Daml, we at Digital Asset work very, very hard to make sure that that application is portable and works as you expect it to across a variety of different infrastructures. One of the things that we're going to demo to you today is a specialized cloud environment that we call Project Daml, DABL. And that's a cloud environment that's been designed entirely with Daml in mind. So that means that we take full advantage of every feature that we know in Daml and are coming up soon in Daml as we anticipate them to really just make your lives significantly easier. So put very simply, Daml allows you to build an application very quickly. Dabl allows you to deploy that application instantaneously and really reap all the benefits of the Daml framework. So let's get into a little bit of the inspiration for Project Daml. At DA, we've spent a lot of time working with large enterprises. So something that not all of you may be aware of is the Australian Securities Exchange is going to replace their entire equities clearing and settlement system using Daml and a distributed ledger. And that's going to go live within the next year or so into production, which means every single equity that trades in the Australian market will clear and settle on a Daml application. That's no small undertaking. We've been working very hard at that for a long time, and we have a few other customers and announcements along that size and scale. So this is a framework used for very large applications, but something that I wanted to make really possible is that same power to be brought to the startup community and anyone who's interested in prototyping something very quickly and to be able to demonstrate to their stakeholders. So generally speaking, in engaging with the enterprises, what I've witnessed is that it's prohibitively expensive to experiment. And this is true for startups as well. Anyone that has a good idea, you never want to spend a lot of time setting up a bunch of infrastructure that doesn't really show to your user, but that often is a tax that gets put on you. And just as a data point here, there was a good Microsoft Azure post where they talk about just simple POCs and simple blockchain POCs could take 8 to 12 weeks or as much as $300,000. And I think actually anecdotally that might be a conservative estimate. I've seen things that are often 2 or 3 times that, and just to test a single idea. And the reason that happens is pretty straightforward. Just if you're trying to build a complete application and bring it to market, the breadth of things that you need to be aware of, competent in, have the skills for, and the stuff that you have to set up from scratch is actually still quite large. While all the cloud platforms have done a tremendous job and some of the PaaS platforms have done a really great job, there's still a lot of work to be done here for a single engineer, often too much for a single engineer, which means you'll start going and hiring people of different skill sets. So when you have all this underlying infrastructure and scaffolding that just makes it possible for your application to run well, your user doesn't see it, but you make a large investment in it. That pushes you into broader skills. I just touched on that. And it's just easy to have an issue in going through that. If you have someone that's maybe learning how to use one of these new frameworks for the first time and they've never used it before, some of them can be quite unforgiving or difficult. There's a lot of trial and error that goes into some of these things. And again, you're not delivering features to your users. You're building the underlying scaffolding and supporting infrastructure for what you need to do. And that really messes with your complete timeline. So whether you're a startup and you're trying to get your MVP live as soon as humanly possible, or you're an enterprise and you're trying to experiment, the longer it takes you to get to understand your idea and how do my users engage with my idea, then the longer it takes you to get to production. And also there's a lot that goes into being said about the agile methodology, but one of the things that I think is really positive about it is just the ability to experiment quickly, test, get some feedback, right? So the longer your feedback loops are, the longer your iteration cycles are, then just the less likely you are to have picked the right idea to begin with. And, oftentimes people will say something like, oh, hey, let's do a quick little POC, but they'll only show it to their stakeholders at the very end, because that's only when everything came together and they could finally show something to somebody. And we really wanted to see, could you do this within a couple days? Could you get your first working prototype and not just, like slideware and code, but a true application, fully authenticated, everything through and through, and something that people could truly use, could you get to that in a few days? And for us, as we examined some of the really cool properties of Daml, we realized that with the right environment, that would be possible. So we set out with kind of a goal in mind when we wanted to create Dabble. And one was really to just enable rapid innovation. So here's an example of an application that we wrote a blog post about. This is a Trello clone. One engineer completed a Trello clone in about a week. We rely upon it for our roadmap for Project Dabble. You can go look at it. It's public right now. But we had a pretty decent idea. We, begged, borrowed, pleaded, and stole some open source code here and there and put it together and put it together on top of some of the stuff we were doing. So it's not like every single thing came from scratch, but that doesn't matter, right? What matters is getting something done, getting something in front of people, starting to use it, and starting to expose what you overlooked or what you really need to do. So Daml plus Dabble meant that we could build a complete Trello clone and use it in production in a week, which I think is not to be overstated. Now, not only is it up and running, but other people can interact with it. So all of you could go to what we're now calling Open Work Board, and you could play with this example of the Trello clone that we have. So what that concretely means is it is a real app, right? I think that you've seen a number of people that have. Oh, we've got a raised hand here. I'm gonna mess my flow really quick. I'm gonna play with this because it's a fun feature. Hello. You raised your hand, and you're muted. David.
Mute him.
Okay.
I think I think I have the power. Let me see.
I think that I'm just excited to try all this virtual conferencing stuff out now that we're all going to be.
Nope, I do not have the power to unmute him. So.
Okay. All right. Sorry. We tried. So yeah, I'll just keep going with this. But the idea was, if you sit down and you're learning a new language or framework, there are often build a workflow tool, in a couple days, or here's a couple example apps that you could build in a day or two, and they're really great tutorials to help you learn how to do something. But I don't think anybody would be in a position to deploy that, expose it to the public, and let anybody use it. And so when we talk about these applications being up and running, they're fully exposed to the open world, and people can use these things right now. So it's more than just the tutorial and learning. It's at the end of that tutorial and learning, you have a fully functioning MVP. It's not just a learning tool or a tutorial. The other thing is, if you're going through a few different ideas and you're just using Daml and Dabble, all of your thinking is in a single constrained sort of problem space. You're not context switching between how do I make Kubernetes work and how do I get my application to work and where do I do caching and how do I expose this feature. All you're ever thinking about is features. You're just saying, what is the business logic of my application? How does it behave? How do people interact with it? And that focus allows you to just get a lot deeper about those features and what it means to you and your users. And it's also economical. We've touched on this in a lot of different ways, but I'll be explicit about it. If you are not hiring extra engineers, you're not spending a lot of your time learning new skill sets, you are not overpaying for a bunch of infrastructure that you may not know if you need, then you find that you have an extremely economical approach, both from time and cost. So it's really kind of a two-factor benefit. And you can go live, right? And I mentioned this before, but I want to bring it up one more time. There's really nothing quite like pushing the go live button and starting to interact with some of your first users. You'll instantly get exposed to all of your own assumptions that were way off or spot on. It's exhilarating. And the longer you postpone that, the longer you kind of walk potentially in the wrong direction. So you want to engage as soon as humanly possible. And if you're making them happy, you're happy. It's a very virtuous, positive feedback loop. So just maybe to reiterate or call out some of the things that I discussed. Daml is a language that allows you to express your application purely in business logic. And this is a slide that I like to show. This is the AWS CTO who's saying, in the future, all you ever write is business logic. Well, I got news for him, because the future is here. The future is Daml. Daml allows you to do exactly this. And you'll see some Daml code in a minute. But this is, I think, often conflated with low code or no code, which is not what we are talking about. We are still talking about a developer sitting down and writing code. But we are also talking about that developer interacting with the business part of their team or their co-founder in a way that you haven't seen before, like being able to actually talk about code, reason about code, understand code, even if you don't have an engineering background. And that's exactly what Daml's doing. That's its whole purpose. Something worth pointing out is that Daml's completely open source, top to bottom. Everything you need to build a complete application yourself, daml.com, download the SDK, it's all there. Once you go to deploy that, we have a number of commercially supported vendors for different types of infrastructure, and also Project Daml. So you could build an application, you could launch it in Project Daml right away. If you're not comfortable using the cloud, or you have a specific infrastructure requirement, that application is completely portable against a growing number of commercially supported infrastructures outside of digital asset. So I think with that,
yeah.
Do we want to take a question, Manish, or do we just want to keep rolling? How do you want to run this thing?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please post it on the chat or the Q&A panel now, and then we can take those questions up. I did see one question. Oh, there's a question. They're asking, what is the licensing of Daml?
Daml is Apache 2. Apache 2.0, completely free and clear for you to use and incorporate in any way that you'd like.
Yep. And another question that came up was, when I deploy my application on Project Daml, is it free to start with?
Yes, absolutely. So if one of my really big goals for the whole project is that people can download, get started, get all the way into something and see, did this work for them, long before I force them to make an economic decision. Because that often goes hand in hand with your idea. Maybe you think you have a really great idea, but you find that people are willing to use it, but you're not sure how you're going to monetize it yet. Well, you don't want to get stuck in a situation where you're prematurely raising money in order to continue your idea, or having to make a lot of purchase decisions too early. So download the SDK, build your application, deploy it in Daml. And our goal for Daml, we haven't found exactly the usage threshold where we would ask people to become paying customers yet. But the idea is that we want that to coincide with as you are starting to gain momentum in production and you're going to stay there. So for anyone that's experimenting, anybody that's early in their life cycle, everyone that's kicking the tires, I want to make sure that people can do that without having any economic decision making.
Yeah. Another question, Eric, is can we use Project Daml and Daml in our innovation lab or in some pilots as an enterprise?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have several different ways that you can engage in Project Daml. One is you can use it just as is, and you can log in and you can go use it right now. So if you are an enterprise and you're an innovation lab, you're welcome to do that as an individual. If you would like to provide Project Daml to your constituents in an innovation lab, we also talk to people about how we can present Daml in a white label way so that it is your product and you're presenting it to your constituents. But it's for everybody. It's for startups that like production. It's for enterprises that are on a stepping stone to a bigger production decision. Could be for innovation labs to run tons and tons of projects and test cases to figure out what's the right thing to do, and kind of everything in between.
Okay, perfect. And one last question I'm looking at is, this is from David. We were trying to unmute him. So he says he has a business background, and what kind of developer skill set or expertise would he need to work with Daml, and when he actually gets to the point where he has to develop something?
Sure. So the developer, I think that the people who take to Daml very quickly already have a functional background in programming. However, some of the strongest Daml engineers that we have in the company have never worked with something outside of something like C++ or Java. So we've found that learning Daml tends to be quite straightforward and fairly quick for people. I'd say in the first couple of weeks, there's a pretty steep learning curve because the mental model is different, not because the language is difficult. but just thinking about how the application is structured and the architecture is a little bit different. So there are some like very early sort of learning points. But if you blaze through a week or two of putting together a POC, by your second one, I would say that you're going to be extremely skilled. So if you look for anybody with a reasonable amount of experience, let's say, 3 to 10 years of experience, kind of anywhere in that range, someone who's comfortable with using more than one language in a given stack, and someone that has kind of deployed something historically, then it should be easy for that engineer to learn Daml and become productive quite quickly. We also do regular training and sort of outreach to the community. We have a Slack channel for people to ask questions. We've been told that the documentation is fantastic. So in terms of the developer type, I don't think you need to have a narrow search. You just need to find someone that when they play with it for a day, they see the point of it and they enjoy it. Developers can be quite particular about what they do and don't like. So I would say, let someone try before you force it on them.
Yep. And I just
to
wanted to add.
something to that.
Yeah, go ahead, Levi.
Yeah, that so David, you have a business background. I would say you'll find that with Daml, you're able to sort of pick up and read the developer code, the code that has been developed by the person that you hire. So myself, I often find it that I can give my Daml code to a BA or somebody who is a subject matter expert, and they'll be able to sort of find some of the the bugs in there having to do with rights and obligations. So it's intended to be read by non-technical people as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Levi. And I just wanted to add to that, David, that and for everybody else, of course, if you have a little bit of a business background and if you also have a little slight tech background, so a techno functional person, that person is best to hire, not necessarily a hardcore developer, because as you will see in the next 30 minutes or so, Daml is a very functional, functional language that sort of helps you mirror your business process. So a developer who understands the business and understands your vision as to what you want to do would be ideal to get. Just one final question, Levi, before we move on. This is from Richard. Has Daml been formally verified?
I'd sort of have to ask formally verified to with respect to its rights and obligations. Daml has a number of properties that make it analyzable in a way that like a general purpose programming language may not be analyzable. And with respects to sort of rights and obligations, which is kind of the secret sauce of Daml, we've done some work indeed to make sure that like disclosures works the way you expect, that rights and obligation works the way you'd expect.
Yeah, and maybe I think as we go through the webinar, I think then this question we can pick up again towards the end. I think once we show the model. Okay, great. Thank you, Eric. So we move on to the next phase where now we want to show you how to bring up a live application.
Look okay? Good. Okay. Great. So there's a lot of promise in that pitch by Manish. But what we'll show here is sort of the building blocks that we'll need to get started, and how Daml sort of ensures some of those features that Manish mentioned. So what I'll show here is I'll show how to start with the Daml bit. After that, I'll upload that to Dabble and basically play around with it to see, what would happen. What are some of the consequences of disclosure and some of the choices that we've built on there. And then lastly, I'll show how you would start to deploy that on a React app. Okay, does that sound good? And feel
Yeah.
free to sort of stop me with questions. But I would say that the next couple of minutes are going to be a little bit more technical than what we've shown so far. So I will be going through some of the Daml code that I've written here.
Yeah, actually, Levi, if you can hold on for 1 second, I forgot to, launch a poll. So we had created a poll for everyone. I'm just bringing up that now.
All right, so
Just to,
I'll stop sharing. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yep.
think you can keep sharing. I think 1 second. Let me launch the poll
Okay,
and
sure.
see. Okay, so here's a poll. If everyone can see the poll on their screen, if you can just mark, what your profile is. Like this is basically about, do you have an idea for a startup? Are you working on a startup? Do you work within an enterprise, or are you just here to learn and have fun, or some other things?
Yeah, this is kind of in lieu of meeting you face to face.
Yeah.
Because this is the sort of thing we would do over the beers and the pizzas at the end of it. But this is just to give us an idea of where we can go, for instance, for next time, or even in this session.
Okay.
So should I get going, you think,
Yeah,
Manish?
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think we've got enough responses now, I think. So let me end the poll. It looks like almost 45% are already working on a startup. 2 of them have an idea for a startup, and a few, 3 of them are just here to learn and have fun. So that's perfect. So this is the result that you can see on your screen now. So yeah, good. Yeah, that gives us a good idea of of where to lean, during the presentation.
Okay. What do you want to do with this, Manish? Should we discuss this sort of thing now, or do you want to wait until the end of it to sort of get to some of these ideas? I'm kind of excited to know what the startups are, or what the
Yeah, I think maybe we could do that towards the end, Levi. Once, yeah.
Okay, that works. Works for me. So let me close the poll here. Okay, so like I said, what I'll do here is I'll go over some lines of this Daml code. There's really only about 76 lines of Daml code to get us started with the back end of it. Obviously, it's only sort of the seed of the idea, the seed of the feature set that we would want. So I'll go over some of the kind of key concepts of Daml. And then we'll upload that to Daml and interact with that backend through the Daml console. Okay, so without further ado, I'll get right into the code here. If you've heard me describe Daml before, you'll know that Daml consists mainly of writing these things called templates, which describe the behavior and the data associated with smart contracts on a ledger. So if you're from an object-oriented background, then you can kind of think of templates as classes with data and behavior. Alternatively, if you're looking at if you're used to looking at a lot of SQL code, you can imagine that each template describes a particular table in a database schema, and rather than behavior, we have row-level permissioning on the items in each of those tables. So you can imagine that there's a table called user having these data elements, and the different parties that can access the table are sort of delineated down here and explored in detail, or basically defined in detail. Okay, so without further ado, like I said, templates consist of mostly data. So in this case, I have this concept of a user, which has a name, it's associated with a party, and there's private and shareable data within that user. So one thing here is that this party literal, or this party type, describes, encapsulates all of the sort of hashing and cryptography associated that you would need on a DLT or a SQL database. So the idea is that you never have to worry about things like public-private key cryptography. You don't have to worry about hashing. You don't have to worry about sort of user authentication or rights. They're all encapsulated here. The private and the shareable data are in this case just text, but we could develop something rather more sophisticated and normalized using the data definition capabilities of Daml. Okay, so that's the data associated with a user. One very important aspect of Daml is that it has this concept of a signatory, which entails a couple of things. So in this case, we have the party associated to our user. We say that that's a signatory of that contract. And what that means is that they're responsible for the content of that contract. But also, it's impossible for this contract to be created without the permission of this party. So in this case, we are associating a particular name of an end user to his physical representation as a party. And what we're saying is that this user contract is undersigned by that physical entity. So in the case of Daml, this party is going to be effectively a you can think of it as a Daml ID. This could be a Google authentication or something similar. In the case of something like and any of our DLT participants, the party can be a particular node on a network. It could be a party belonging to a node on the network, but nevertheless, it'll be there would be some sort of cryptography there to ensure that logon really belonged to the right entity. Okay, so that's signatory. That's what signatory means here. I also included a key to this user. It basically allows the end user to always find this contract on the ledger whenever he needed to look something up for it. Okay, so this just basically means the key for the user on the ledger is going to be the party field. And this means something really very similar to when you declare a key in a SQL schema. The next part, we say that so we granted the obligation to the party of the user to basically be on the hook for the veracity of the information, but we also gave him a right to say that anytime they can request information from another participant. Okay, so it's basically saying, okay, as a user in the system, I'm able to request information from any other participant within the system. So what this says is that the party is able to request information having these arguments. Effectively, this will send a little message to the other party on the network with this text bit here, requesting their shareable information. Because remember, this is a DLT, and by default, none of these user contracts are going to be disclosed without explicitly being disclosed. Okay, so by default, everything is completely private. So when we create this information request, what actually happens is that a new type of contract is created called an information request, which has a different set of data associated to it and a different set of rights and obligations. So the information request is going to have a from, a to, and the message that we put in before. Now here, note that the signatory and the controllers are different participants. Well, so this basically says you got a correct signature from a party on the network, and that the controller is able to accept the willing to share information. So once the final party accepts that contract, the information request will be archived and will create effectively a shared token. Once again, share is a different, is yet another template here. Okay, so it's very simple. The original participant can use his user contract to make an information request. Then the recipient of that contract is able to accept that information request. And the final result of it is really just a shared bit of data here. The important thing is that when the two party accepts the contract, he also shares with it the shareable bit of his user data. So you can kind of think of it as, you know, you have a profile on something like Instagram, and somebody requests your sort of private data. Well, then you can you make an information request, and then as soon as you accept, that private data is shared. And so this contract, this share contract, is actually undersigned by both participants, which has the which means that both parties are also going to be able to see that contract. And very importantly, you always know by looking at a template which participants on that template are going to be able to see it. They either have to be a signatory on it, they have to have some sort of rights on it, or optionally there's an observer keyword that you can make them explicitly explicitly an observer to it. So in this case, this share contract will be visible to all of the different to both participants of this exchange. And this will live on the ledger until the person who requested it withdraws it. Okay, so that's what this revoke means. It's basically, it gives them the right to delete it whenever they want to. Now this update info choice, all that does is update the information using the basically if the user has a new name or a new shareable data, they get to update it and notify the person who it was shared with. Okay, so that's the Daml background. I know that was a little bit of a bear, but are there any questions on this so far?
Yeah, no questions from the audience so far, Levi, except one thing that came up is we mentioned at the beginning that the platform itself will not have access to the data. Is that true in this scenario?
Yeah, and we'll see that as we deploy who gets to see what exactly. Okay. Okay. So if there's no questions on this thing, like I said, the whole thing is very, very simple. There's a user with some private and public data, and these users can make information requests to one another, and then which result in these things called shares. And shares are basically a record of what was shared between the different participants.
Exactly. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in with just one quick thing. If you remember from the use case, we had said that the platform itself may be able to request data from the user in exchange for a fee. So if that has to happen, essentially, Levi, we'll probably just add a choice, right? Where you have controller, where you have the controller, you'll add another keyword, add another choice for the platform to exercise, where the platform can send an information request to the user in exchange for some fees, right?
Yeah, for the moment, right now, the ability to accept the information request is, it's without a fee. But you could easily imagine that instead of just straightforward accepting, the recipient of the information can send back effectively an invoice saying like, sure, but you have to pay me, right? And then this acceptance, this share will only happen once the either invoice is paid or you create the IOU. So right now there's no condition on actually doing a share, but we can, instead of just straightforward accepting, generate a delivery versus payment where the security part of it is the actual share and the payment is reflected somehow on Ledger. Okay.
Sorry, one question that came up in the Q&A.
Sure. No need to say sorry for that. I like questions.
Would there be any meaning to information request dot reject in this model?
Sure. Let's put that in. Let's actually put that in. So rejection will actually just destroy the request. But you know what? Let's do something a little bit fancier. Let's say in the end of it, there's going to be a rejection contract at the end. So the rejection contract is going to have the two parties as before and a reject message. And let's keep the original message as well. The two signatories on this thing are the from and to. So we'll wire that up now to the information request. We're going to give an argument to this, a reject message. And this will simply create a rejection. The little dots here mean that take the from, to, and the message attributes from the original, and also the reject message from here. So it basically says it's the same thing as saying from equals from, to equals to, reject message equals reject message, and so forth. So this is just a faster way to type all of that. Okay, so now this gives us the opportunity to reject a contract. Okay, does that make sense for whoever asked that?
Yeah, Stephen. Yeah, I think he's probably going to chat back if he doesn't like the answer. Okay.
Okay. We still haven't figured out how to give somebody the mic, right?
Yeah, it's not working for some reason. So essentially, as everybody saw, this is just a series of contracts being created in response to certain actions and obligations. Let me see, what is he? I think there's a message from. Okay, I think we can move forward. Yeah, go ahead, Levy. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we wrote our model now. So the next step, and before I get to it, I'm going to start a new ledger here. Actually, let me log out and log back in just so that you see the idea.
Exactly. Yeah, and creating an account on projectdaml.com is free, of course, like Eric mentioned. So during this webinar, or after the webinar, I'll send out a bunch of information links in a follow-up email, and then you can obviously log in, deploy your own ledgers, experiment with it, and of course, you can get in touch with us if you need any assistance at all.
Okay. So yeah, the first place you go to projectdaml.com. If you already have a logon, you just say login. But I think there's a new here we go. You can sign up for free. This is what you'd normally click, but I'll just go ahead and sign in with my Google account from DA. Okay, and so what I have here is a number of projects that I'm working on, okay, and their associated ledger run. so in particular that we're going to look at now is contacts, right? So I already have two ledgers deployed, and I'll show you the contents of one. So this is kind of the previous version of the DAR file, but actually now that we made some changes to the code, I'll go ahead and create a new ledger on this. So I'm going to go into my contacts project and I'll create a new ledger. Let's call this staging 3. And this is now spinning up a DLT in the background that we can deploy Daml models to. Okay, so while that is running, what I will do is compile my Daml code, and that's as easy as doing Daml build. And this thing will create a DAR file for me. A DAR file is bytecode that expresses the what we described in Daml. This is the thing that completely encapsulates your entire business process. So what I will do now, so once that's finished, okay. Actually, while that's spinning, I'll go back to the previous ledger. Okay. So once I clicked on the ledger, as the owner of the ledger, I have access to this sort of God's eye view of the data which is associated with users that I've onboarded. That's a very important distinction here. So I created all of these users on my ledger, and they all sort of belong to me as the owner of the ledger. And in sort of an admin mode, I'm able to see the contracts that they've created and so forth. But this is mostly useful for testing purposes. In real life, when users get created completely independent of me, the owner of the ledger, and I will not be able to see them on here at all. So that's a very important point. I will not be able to see their data. However, I've created all of these users myself, so I can see their data, which like I said is very useful for testing. So just keep in mind that even though I'm clicking around here on the different users that I've created and I can see exactly what they have, I would not be able to do this generally. New users get created on the ledger pretty much as soon as you go to the link which we provide. So once you bring a ledger online, there's a website associated with it, and whenever somebody with a valid Daml ID logs onto that website, a new user is created for them that would be invisible to me. Okay. So I already created a user contract for Elvis here. Oh yeah, so whenever I click around, I can see exactly what contracts each of the parties that I've created can see. So I've created a party called Elvis. There's a user for him that describes. So it's Elvis Presley. There's a hashed party ID that's associated with him, and this is the ID that would have to be shared in order to be able to send something to another party. There's some private stuff, and there's some shareable information here. Okay, so as let's say Alice, I'm able to. So first of all, let's create a user ID for myself. So I'll create a user ID. I say, okay, this is, I don't know, Alice, somebody who's associated with Alice. And by the way, I can't, I'll try to pick Bob here and then show you that this won't work. So as Alice, I'm trying to create a user ID for Bob that hopefully should not work. We get this error here. Going back, I'll go ahead and create a proper contract for myself. Which is associated with my real ID. This is the private data that I have, and this is the shareable data. Okay, and having created, so by the way, the interactions that I'm doing with Daml right now, you would normally be doing programmatically from a UI through REST. Okay, so all of these actions that I'm doing right now are available via REST. Okay, so as Alice, I can request info from, let's say Elvis. I'll say, yeah, here we go. Please, 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 as the message. I'll submit this this contract, and as Alice, I see my information request out there. As Elvis, there's a number of contracts that exist for me already, including my own user ID, as well as the information request that just came in from Alice. And by the way, Alice, as far as Elvis is concerned, simply contains this string here. Okay. It's we don't know who this is. This, and the only reason we even know the from party is because they sent us a contract. Okay, so here I can go ahead and accept, and lo and behold, there's a new share contract which has been created, 35.2, which is available for me, Elvis, as well as to Alice here, but nobody else. So it's not available to the fanboy. It's not available to me as a user, and certainly not available to Bob.
Okay. Just a quick comment there, Levi. So when you said the user ID is not visible, so Elvis doesn't know who the request is coming from.
Yep.
That can obviously be changed if you add enough data elements in the template to make sure that Elvis can see who it is coming from, right? It's not a limitation. Right. Yeah, it's not a limitation.
It's not. It's just what I'm trying to say is that the only thing Elvis knows at this point is that a request came in from this hashed string, and the only information which was requested, and let's do this again, is going to be is going to be up to the person who's asking. Okay, so in this case, Alice. So if typically Alice would do something like, okay, so let's make another information request. Let's ask the fanboy this time. She could say something like, "This is Alice. You know, please say yes." You know. In which case, you know, the fanboy would only receive that. And of course, you probably want to include more information in this just to make sure that really that is the person that they said it was. Okay. And of course, you can also choose to publish your ID. So on a website or something, saying like that's my ID. If you want to ask me anything, just use that ID. Okay. So I'll go ahead and accept that. Okay, so and this is the idea. Now fanboy has a bunch of different shares. Sometimes he's the recipient of the information. Sometimes the other person is the recipient of the information. One important thing here is that which you sort of can't get out of something like Facebook or Instagram today, is that you have no way to know who has your data. Okay. With something like this, you know at least who you shared it with throughout your throughout throughout the life cycle of throughout the life cycle of all of your shares. So you can kind of imagine trying to ask somebody like Instagram or LinkedIn, hey, who has access to my data right now? Please tell me who actually accessed all of the data that was private to me. That would be pretty much impossible. Where here it's really obvious. The only way somebody can have access to your data is through this mechanism. Obviously, they can replicate it. They could take snapshots, etc. But at least you know that any live shares that you've done has come through this mechanism. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show about this.
Do you want to quickly show the on the docs the API portion to see how easy it is to build a front end on it?
Yep, will do. Yeah, will do. And also, I'll upload we made some changes to the Daml model right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and upload that change. So this is a new ledger now. This is the ledger that we created a while ago. Hopefully, see, now we have this reject on here, and I'll just quickly run through demoing that. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll create a party. Let's say I don't know, Taylor Swift. Oh,
not that kind of party.
Here we go. So what I'll do is both Taylor Swift and myself will be set up with users. Associated with Taylor Swift.
I'm getting an idea for a startup actually to help celebrities share information for a fee.
I don't know. Okay, so that's Taylor Swift's ID here. Then we're gonna set up mine. Party is associated to me. Okay. So now I have my own user, so I'm going to go ahead and ask Taylor Swift something. There we go. That's my message. And as Taylor Swift, I see this message and I'm going to reject. There we go.
Message is clearly too cool. That's the response.
No, it's neckbeard.
Uh-huh.
There we go. And so now I have this. Taylor Swift sent me a rejection, which I get as well. So yeah, so like I said, the key features are that at least of this network is that all of the data is available if you created it, if you're entitled to it and you're a stakeholder to it, but not under any other circumstance. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show in Daml today. The next part is let's go ahead and look at the documentation here. So all of the interaction that I just did, including creating contracts and exercising choices, are available with relatively simple APIs here. So there's so I went to the documentation here, and anybody familiar with REST should get this in a very, very quickly. It's basically, you can query the ledger for contracts that you're entitled to. You can create contracts to the ledger, and you can exercise choices on the ledger. So that's why there's basically only two ways to write to the ledger. We just created also a streaming API via WebSockets. So that's the same deal. That's a streaming API to get your live contracts updated. And that's it. So it's a very simple API that you can send from basically a front end.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out that for anybody who's looking to do something here with Daml and create an application, when you create an application, the front end application in a modern stack such as React, you can take that.
I can talk about
Yeah,
that one.
yeah, you can take that entire front end and just host it on Dabble. So you don't need to look for any new servers or anything like that. Everything from security to authorization to load balancing, availability, all of that stuff is automatically taken care of for you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Manish. So on Dabble, we're hosting the Daml model, obviously, as well as the static assets that we would create with React or any other web framework, actually. We're also looking to add a couple of services, including some automation that you can build as well. On the UI assets themselves, I would also point you to this GitHub repository which has a sample UI built into it. So it's really easy to deploy. You just follow the instructions here, and what it will do is it will create basically a front end like this for your own model. So in this case, the underlying model is the very simple sort of out of the box asset model, and you can see all of the fields on that. So now this can be either deployed directly to Dabble, or you can run it alongside with connected to the sandbox, or run it standalone. Okay, so if you don't want to deploy it to Dabble for some reason, kind of the point of that is that if you ever intend to use Dabble as sort of a sandbox to build your proof of concept, the front end is going to be entirely portable as well. Okay. I think that's all I wanted to go over. And like when he said, we'll distribute all of these all of this information at the end as well. Okay.
Yep.
Any questions? Type it in the chat as usual, and hopefully maybe we find a way to give you the microphone.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any specific questions come up. There was one question that came up, I think, which you've already addressed, which was around authentication. So how do you automatically authenticate people on Project Devil? I think that is built in, right? So if you can just briefly go over that.
Yeah, sure. So the authentication on Project Dabble is going to work with effectively your Google ID, right? So once you create your own, so when you sign up for Dabble, there's a couple of ways to authenticate. One is with, let's say, the G Suite. Another one is you could just provide a username and password. So we'll basically associate your party ID with that login. That's sort of the job of Daml, is to make sure that authentication is kind of transparent and pass through. Is that right, Eric? Am I saying it correctly?
Yeah, I would say that what we are trying to help people do is make sure that they never need to provision their own authorization. So in the documentation, there's a way that shows you how to follow a pattern in your UI that would then make it possible for your users to directly authenticate into the service without you having to provision a separate authentication service. There's a demo application that anyone can go and deploy themselves, which is called Dabble Chat. And in there, it's an open source repo. You could look at the code. You could see how we've incorporated the the authentication flow to make it possible for your users to log in. And you can mimic that directly, and then you'll get authorization out of the for.
To deploy that app, basically you have to create a ledger, and then you basically deploy it immediately. And this deploys the Daml model. It deploys some automations, but as Eric was saying, it also deploys the front end code.
Great. Levy, just one thing that came up. We mentioned that everything is private between the user. How about if you want to share some information with a third party, like a regulator or someone, to let them know what's going on, or even with someone like a support, like a production support person, an application support person, if they want to look at, what happened, would you use the observer keyword, or how would you do that?
So that's one way to do it. Here, kind of the point of the app was to keep everything as private as possible, but there's nothing preventing us from adding like a third-party observer, let's say, or I should say second-party observer to the users. So let's say there was a regulator. Would there be a regulator? I don't know. Let's call it the operator of the network. So in this case, you can say, this is sort of de facto what happens today on Instagram and Facebook, is that the operator sees everything, right?
Yeah, I think that's an important point, is that you can easily add this, and then it's no better than the existing systems, with one critical difference, which is that as a user of the system, you know this explicitly. So all the data sharing information has to be written in the code, which is part of the data that you're a party to. So you could easily audit and see who is allowed to see this contract at any given time.
Okay, yeah, that's it. I'm not seeing any other Q&A.
I think I see something. Oh, yes, of course. Okay. Never mind. No Q&A that I see.
Okay,
well,
great.
I think not a bad first attempt. These things are always a little rocky to try to do virtually, but I hope everybody feels that they are comfortable reaching out to us if they need anything. We're happy to walk you through anything that you might need to be successful. I know some of you happen to pop up a little bit later. And here's a question: would there be a concern about the ability to scale in Daml? That is from Dan Schwartz, and my return would be, what type of scale are you concerned about? Is it throughput? Is it total storage? Is it number of users? Is it, I think, scale is always kind of it depends on really what you're solving for. But generally speaking, we've built a system that is there to scale up with your use. We've tested Daml excessively through throughput and had really great performance with that, much higher than even the needs of, say, the New York Stock Exchange. Dabble, we're still working on hitting those same throughput numbers. So right now, I would say if you're in the early stage of your application deployment, we'll have plenty of overhead for you. But that number is improving constantly as we work at that every single day. And our goal would be that there is really no limit to what you could do. But I'd be happy to speak to you directly, Dan, and see if you had a specific use case in mind and give you a clearer answer.
There was another question on the chat. So and Manish answered there. Like, where do you ask us questions? And best way is Slack. Best way is Slack, I would say.
Yeah, and I'll share that information along with the recording. So I think later tomorrow, I'll send out the recording to everybody, and also a bunch of links and some supporting material that'll help you learn a little bit more. And of course, if you have any questions, just join the public Slack or respond to me, and I'll help you as required. Perfect. And so I think Levy, is there anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I think that's about it. Technically, probably there's about million other things we could go into, but really the best thing I would encourage you to do is go to projectdaml.com and have a look at the quick start, have a look at the chat application that you can deploy, and go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and so hopefully for everyone, it was clear how you can go from a simple idea. We had a simple idea of how do you share information between users on a network, and we morphed it to how do you exchange information with a celebrity for a fee. So things like those, very simply, 60, 70 lines of Daml code. We could write the business process and deploy it on Daml, see it working, and all that needs to be done now is to deploy a front end on it using the simple APIs that Levi showed on the screen, and even that front end can be deployed on Daml along with a login, a single sign-on. So it makes it completely seamless for you to go from an idea to a quick demoable prototype that you can start sharing with your stakeholders and get feedback and keep refining it and hopefully get to your product market fit pretty quickly. Yep. So I think as a follow-up, I'm going to send out the recording to everyone later tomorrow, and then obviously also a bunch of links and additional information for you. If you have any questions, definitely ping me on the Meetup group, or you can also ping me at my email address where I'll send you the information from. All right, then. Thank you so much. Eric, any last comments?
No, just thank you very much. I know that there's a lot going on right now. People could have given their attention to something else, perhaps more pressing. So I really appreciate that everybody took the time to join us. And please feel free to reach out to us in any way and let us know how we can help you be more successful.
Yeah. And stay safe, everyone. And yeah, talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.